Welcome to the Science of Hockey, the podcast where we break down the science behind ice hockey. I'm the analyst, your host, and every week we explore the data, research, and evidence that shape how we play, train, and understand the game of hockey. From biomechanics to performance psychology, we take you beyond the rink and into the research lab, giving you insights that go beyond hearsay and into what really makes the difference on the ice. Whether you're a player, a coach, a parent, or just someone passionate about the sport, we're here to bring you scientifically backed information in a language that's friendly and easy to understand. So grab your skates and let's dive into the science of hockey. Welcome to the Science of Hockey, where we analyze the equipment shaping the game. I'm your host, the analyst. Today, we explore how upper body hockey pads affect mobility and comfort. Join us as we uncover the trade-offs between protection and performance and discuss how innovations could revolutionize player gear.
You know how hockey pads are supposed to protect players, but have you ever wondered how much they might actually be holding them back?
That's a really good question.
Yeah.
And there's actually some fascinating research that sheds light on that.
Okay.
Researchers at Beijing Sport University and the China Institute of Sport Science.
Wow.
Yeah, they published a study in iScience called Quantifying the Effects of Ice Hockey, Upper Body Pads on Mobility and Comfort.
Mm-hmm.
And it gets into some really fascinating details.
Okay, so quantifying the effects sounds like they went beyond just, the pads feel kind of bulky.
Yeah.
They actually measured how much those pads restrict movement.
Exactly.
Yeah.
They wanted to kind of put some hard data behind those feelings.
Right.
So they looked at range of motion, or ROM, in degrees.
Okay.
To see how much different pads actually limit a player's movements.
So how'd they do that? Do they just have players stand there with their arms out or something?
Well, it was a bit more involved than that.
Yep.
They had 9 elite college hockey players go through a series of movements.
Okay.
Both static and dynamic.
Gotcha.
Static movements would be like shoulder rotations.
Oh, okay.
While dynamic movements included things like wrist shots and slap shots.
That makes sense because you can't really assess how pads affect performance if you're not looking at actual hockey moves.
Exactly.
So what kind of pads were they using for this?
So the players wore 5 different commercially available shoulder and elbow pad brands.
Okay.
Bauer Vapor, Bauer NSX, Vic Max,
Gotcha.
Hylong, and IBX.
Wow, so 5 different brands, a bunch of different moves.
Yeah.
That's a lot of data. I'm guessing some pads were more restrictive than others?
Absolutely. And one of the most surprising findings was that it's not just about the bulkiness. For example, shoulder abduction, which is basically raising your arm out to the side, was limited by an average of 17.3 degrees.
Wow.
Compared to not wearing pads at all.
That's almost a 20-degree difference. I can see how that can make a big difference when you're trying to, say, make a pass.
Yeah, absolutely. It could definitely affect your reach and accuracy.
Yeah.
And it wasn't just shoulder abduction. Elbow flexion.
So bending your arm.
Yeah. Bending your arm saw a decrease in range of motion up to 27.2%.
Ouch. That's got to impact how you shoot the puck. Did they actually measure how the pads affected the different shots?
That's where it gets really interesting.
Okay.
Because they did look at the range of motion during dynamic movements, like wrist shots and slap shots.
Oh, wow.
And what they found was pretty significant.
Okay, give me an example. How much were these movements actually affected by the pads?
So, for instance, during wrist shots, some pads limited left elbow flexion by almost 43%.
That's huge.
That's huge.
That's not just feeling a little stiff. That's potentially changing your entire shooting technique.
That's a great point.
Well,
could it be forcing them to compensate in ways that reduce accuracy or power? These are the sorts of questions this research raises.
Yeah, for sure.
And it wasn't just wrist shots. For slap shots, the most noticeable limitations were in shoulder movement. Particularly in the frontal plane.
I'm not sure I'm familiar with that term. What exactly does frontal plane mean?
So imagine you're facing a mirror. The frontal plane is like an invisible wall dividing your body into front and back halves. So restrictions in the frontal plane means the pads were limiting the player's ability to rotate their arms forward and back.
Gotcha.
Movements that are crucial for generating power in a slap shot.
Ah, okay. That makes sense. So limiting that movement could really affect how effectively a player can shoot.
Exactly.
Did the study look at anything besides range of motion? Like, did they consider how the players felt in the different pads?
Yes, that was a key part of the research.
Okay.
They didn't just stop at the physical measurements.
Right.
They also had the players rate the comfort of each pad.
So they combined objective data with the players' subjective experiences.
Exactly.
That's a cool approach.
It is, and it yielded some insightful results.
All right. Okay.
They found a strong correlation between range of motion and comfort.
Okay.
The pads that restricted movement the most were consistently rated as less comfortable.
Well, that makes sense, right? If you can't move freely, you're probably going to feel uncomfortable.
Exactly.
Did any brands score well in both categories?
Yes. The Bauer NSX and Bauer Vapor were rated highly for both comfort and range of motion.
Interesting.
It might indicate that their focus on lightweight materials and anatomical design is paying off.
So those brands might be on to something, but before we get too carried away, I know you mentioned that this study did have some limitations.
Right. It's important to acknowledge those.
Yeah.
One of the main limitations was the relatively small sample size. Only 9 players participated.
Yeah, I was wondering about that. 9 players is a pretty small group. It makes you wonder if the results would hold up with a larger group of players, maybe even players with different skill levels.
Definitely. But even with that limitation,
yeah,
the study gives us some very valuable insights into the relationship between hockey pads, mobility, and comfort.
Okay, so we've seen that pads definitely do affect how much a player can move.
Yes.
And that this impacts their comfort level, but what does all of this actually mean for players and the game itself? I'm curious to hear your thoughts on that.
Well, that's the big question, isn't it?
Yeah.
And I think this research opens up some really interesting avenues for exploration.
Okay.
It makes you wonder if we could be doing more to optimize the design of hockey pads.
Okay.
Like, what if instead of simply adding more padding for protection, we could design pads that provide protection without sacrificing so much mobility?
That's a fascinating idea. I never thought of it that way. What would that kind of design even look like?
Well, imagine pads that are lightweight and flexible,
Okay.
allowing for a fuller range of motion while still offering that essential protection.
Yeah.
It's about finding that sweet spot where protection and mobility work together, not against each other.
Pads that enhance performance instead of hindering it. It almost sounds too good to be true.
It might sound futuristic, but I think this research shows it's possible.
Okay.
Remember how the Bauer NSX and Bauer Vapor scored well on both comfort and ROM?
Yeah.
Perhaps those brands are already on the right track with their design philosophy.
That's a good point. So maybe instead of just thinking about how to make pads bigger and stronger, designers need to start thinking about how to make them smarter.
Yeah.
And more responsive to a player's movements.
Exactly. It's not just about padding. It's about understanding how the pads interact with the biomechanics of the player's body.
Right.
We need to design gear that works with the body's natural movements, not against them.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. What kind of impact did this have on the game itself?
Oh, it could be huge.
Yeah.
Imagine players being able to move faster, react quicker, and shoot harder.
Yeah.
All thanks to pads that don't hold them back.
Wow.
It could take the game to a whole new level.
And wouldn't that also mean potentially fewer injuries?
Oh, that's another critical point.
Yeah.
We tend to think of pads primarily as injury prevention tools.
Right.
But if those pads are restricting movement to the point where they're causing strain or unnatural biomechanics,
Right.
could they actually be increasing the risk of certain injuries?
Wow.
It's something to consider.
So it's not just about preventing the puck from hitting you.
Yeah.
It's about preventing your body from working against itself because of the limitations imposed by the pads.
Exactly.
That's an interesting perspective.
It really changes how we think about the effectiveness of protective gear, doesn't it?
Yeah.
We can't just focus on impact absorption or coverage area.
Right.
We need to consider how the gear affects the athlete as a whole.
Yeah.
Their movement, their comfort, everything.
I'm starting to see how this research really challenges some of the traditional assumptions about hockey pads.
Yeah.
It's not just about brute force protection. It's about finding that balance between protection and performance.
And it's not just about elite players either.
Oh.
These findings have implications for players at all levels,
Right.
from youth leagues to professional teams.
Yeah.
If we can create pads that are more comfortable and less restrictive,
Yeah.
we can help players develop better technique and potentially reduce the risk of injuries regardless of their skill level.
That's a great point, especially for young players who are still developing their skills. Having the right gear could make a real difference.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think what we're seeing is a shift in the way we think about hockey equipment.
Okay.
We're moving beyond the idea of just protection
Right.
And towards the idea of optimization.
Okay.
How can we design gear that enhances performance and allows players to reach their full potential on the ice? That's the exciting challenge ahead.
Yeah, it's almost like we're on the cusp of a new era in hockey equipment design. But I wonder, could this kind of thinking be applied to other sports as well? I was just thinking, about how this idea of balancing protection and mobility could apply to other sports as well.
Oh, yeah?
It's not just hockey players who need to move freely while staying safe, right?
Absolutely. Think about football players with their bulky pads and helmets, or baseball catchers with all their protective gear.
Yeah.
Even skiers and snowboarders need equipment that provides protection without hindering their movements.
Yeah, it's like any sport where athletes wear specialized equipment could benefit from taking a closer look at how that equipment affects their performance.
Exactly. This research is a great reminder that the human body is capable of incredible things. And our equipment should be designed to work in harmony with those capabilities, not against them.
So for anyone out there who's involved in designing sports equipment, this study's a real wake-up call.
Yeah.
It's not just about adding more padding or making things stronger. Yeah. It's about understanding how those design choices impact the athlete's ability to move and perform at their best.
I couldn't agree more. It's about shifting our focus from simply preventing injuries to actually optimizing performance.
And who knows what the future holds? Maybe we'll see a whole new generation of sports equipment that's lighter, more flexible, and more responsive to the athlete's movements.
The possibilities are exciting.
Yeah.
What if we could use technology to create gear that adapts to the athlete's body in real time, providing customized support and protection?
Wow, that would be incredible. I can already picture it. Hockey pads that adjust their stiffness based on the player's movements, helmets that sense impacts and adjust their protection levels, even shoes that analyze your running stride and provide personalized cushioning.
Exactly. The future of sports equipment could be incredibly dynamic and responsive.
So for all of you listening, whether you're a diehard hockey fan or just someone who's interested in the intersection of sports and technology, we hope this deep dive has given you some new food for thought.
We'd love for you to consider what other factors might influence the relationship between equipment and performance. And what role could technology play in creating even more adaptive and responsive gear?
What questions does this research raise for you? What would you like to explore further? Keep those questions in mind the next time you head out onto the ice, the field, the court, or wherever your sport takes you.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the world of hockey pads, mobility, and comfort. We hope you enjoyed the exploration.
Until next time, keep asking questions, keep pushing boundaries, and keep exploring the fascinating world of human performance.
Thanks for tuning in to the Science of Hockey. If you enjoyed today's episode, make sure to share it with your friends, teammates, or anyone who loves hockey as much as you do. Don't forget to subscribe so you never miss an episode. And we'd love to hear from you. Leave a comment to let us know what you liked, what you'd like to hear next, or any questions you have. Your feedback helps us make the show even better. Until next time, keep your skates sharp, your mind open, and keep chasing the science behind the game.